Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my BookTube channel. Today I'll be sharing with you some of my top strategies I've used in college to ace my tests and exams. So first of all, I have my glasses on today because this is a very scholastic topic. And honestly, I just wanted to wear them. I got them week before last and I really actually like them. So these are real glasses. It has a prescription. I'm not just wearing them just for cosmetic purposes. So typically I wear contacts. But first of all, I wanted to show off my glasses to you guys today. And then secondly, whenever I wear eyeliner with contacts, sometimes it'll irritate my eyes. So I figured glasses would be a better choice if I'm wearing makeup anyway. But that aside, now let's talk about some test strategies. So I've become really good at test taking, not necessarily because I know how to work hard, but mainly because I know how to work smart. And learning all these strategies really started when I began studying for the SAT. I studied for the SAT for about 7 months. So I studied 4 months before my first test. I read all the books, took notes, listened to all the lectures, and by my first SAT test, I'd done 1,000 practice SAT questions. And then for the next 3 months or so while I was taking the SAT test, which I took 4 actual tests and 15 practice tests, I took one of those practice tests every single weekend. I would get up early, 5 or 6 a.m. Saturday morning, and I'd time myself for 4 hours and do the whole SAT. And then I'd grade myself at the end, and I'd spend the weekdays studying what I did wrong and writing down all the questions that I missed and why I missed them. So I've learned a few of these strategies through studying for the SAT, but I've also learned a few through just being in college. And I found that there's not one strategy that can apply to every type of test. There are certain strategies that are better suited for certain tests. I mean, I've only been in college for 1 semester, but so far I've never made anything less than an A on a test or an exam. So first of all, let's go over some general test-taking strategies. One of the best ones I can recommend is rereading your work. After you go through all your problems in a test, go ahead and go back through all of them and resolve every single one if you have the time. I would do this a lot during math, and it would take up tons of time. Usually I'd be one of the last 3 in the room. And it's silly, but in some ways that made me feel kind of stupid that other people could finish so quickly. But because I redid those problems, I caught several mistakes that I would have completely missed otherwise. And because I was so thorough, especially in my math test, I actually made a 100% average for that class. Which, again, would not have happened had I not gone through the test and then gone through it again and reworked all of the problems. So after I finish a test, I always go back through if I have the time and I make sure that I've given the best possible answer that I can. Another thing that helps, especially in math, is double checking your work as you go. So if you add 2 sets of numbers, go ahead and add it a second time, make sure you come up with the right set again. Or if you're working with line equations, plug the result you got back in for y or x or whatever, and make sure it comes back out like it's supposed to. My next general tip is underline. So underlining is really helpful in just writing notes for yourself. And in tests, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I'm kind of freaking out, even though I'm usually pretty well prepared. Just, there's something about tests that makes me nervous. And when you're nervous, sometimes certain details tend to slip. So I would do certain things like mark on my math test. Like here, I wrote two-tail because particularly in statistics, that was something that was really easy to miss, and you'd have to handle a two-tailed test differently than you would a left-tailed or a right-tailed test. And then also I underline what I'm looking for, which is the most evidence against the null hypothesis. And then sometimes I'd draw boxes around pertinent information. And I'd also draw boxes around questions that I didn't really feel super confident about. That way I could go back and I could pay extra special attention to them once I was done. But when you encounter a difficult problem, either A, solve it the best you can, or B, skip it and move on. Because if you get stuck on one difficult problem, that's going to suck all your time away from the other problems. So just go ahead and solve the rest of the problems, and your subconscious will kind of work on it. And usually when you come back to that problem you found that was really difficult, like you'll see a detail that will stand out to you, or you'll remember how to solve it. But if a problem is too difficult, don't let it get you stumped, just move on. My last general advice tip for taking tests is to ask questions. So my stats teacher was really great about this. Like honestly, about 3 to 5 times per test, I would go up and I'd ask her questions in the middle of the test saying like, okay, what did you mean here? Like when you were like define the parameters, did you want a notation? Did you want something else? And usually she'd kind of walk me through what she wanted. And a lot of other students got those questions wrong that I got right simply because they didn't understand the kind of answer that she was looking for. Because sometimes in statistics, there's more than one way to test something through like a confidence interval, hypothesis test. So do not be afraid to get up in the middle of the test and ask questions. I know some teachers won't be as great about that and they'll just do things like reread the question, but it's totally worth a shot. And in addition, also ask lots of questions after the test. If you got something wrong and you don't know why, ask your professor about it. I know for me this is kind of intimidating sometimes and it's something I need to do better on, but by asking questions when you don't understand something, you can prevent yourself from hopefully making that mistake in the future. I know that when I get something wrong in a test or when I don't get the kind of grade I want, usually I'm like, what's up with the professor? Why did I get this kind of grade? But I recently talked to a friend of mine who teaches English, and he said the one difference he noticed, particularly between American students and international students, was when the American students got a bad grade, they're like, what's wrong with the professor? When the international students got a bad grade, they were like, okay, what can I do better? And I really want to be more careful about developing that kind of attitude, and I think it'll serve me a lot better in college. The next test type I want to talk about is pop quizzes or cumulative tests. So I have an American politics class this semester, and a lot of people did not do really great on it. I believe the class average was 46. And maybe that's just because a lot of people didn't come, so all those zeros dragged the average back down. But needless to say, a lot of people didn't get hundreds on the pop quiz, which is understandable because you don't know when you're going to get tested on these things. But I'd been using this particular strategy to prepare, and I got a 100. And I found this strategy really helpful not only in American politics, but also statistics. So really just anything that has lots of information in it, or information that you need to constantly keep updated, or something that's really cumulative. And this strategy is rewriting your notes. So a lot of times in class, the professor has to go pretty quickly because they want to get you to a certain point by the end of the semester. So you take really sloppy notes in class. I'd use all kinds of abbreviations to help me take notes. But then after the class, I go back and I rewrite all of my notes and I make them pretty. So for statistics, I color-coded it and I use the color code of purple and pink. And this really just helped me to memorize everything because there's not a whole lot to memorize in statistics, but there's a pretty decent amount. And then in American politics, there's just like a lot of details and laws and names. For my American politics class, I used blue and orange. And this illustrates how people tend to idolize the individual and demonize the institution. Like, people think their representative is really great, but politics and Congress in general is like really not great. So I think handwriting in particular is really effective for trying to memorize things because handwriting is supposed to access a part of your brain that simply typing doesn't do. By handwriting it once and then handwriting it again and adding little animations and making it organized and color-coded, it just really helps me to keep up with the material. The next strategy is for tests where there could potentially be a ton of information on it. For me, this was my biology test just because there are so many things you can memorize, like the difference between mitosis and meiosis, the 4 features of life, the different parts of a cell and what they do, like the difference between cytoplasm and cytosol, and also just who invented the microscope, which was Anton von Leeuwenhoek, by the way. And this strategy is making practice tests. So obviously, if you make a practice test for yourself, you're going to kind of know all of the answers. What's really interesting, though, is to get with a friend and study together and to make practice tests for each other. And then once you take the other person's practice test, give it back and grade each other's practice tests, just because they'll think of a lot of questions and details that you hadn't really thought to work on or memorize. So again, I did this with biology, and I actually don't have the grade back from that yet. But I think I at least got an A given that I knew a lot of the questions because several of the questions on the actual test were actually in the practice exams that I'd done with my friends. So this was one practice test that one of my friends made for me. For the next test, my friend and I wrote really, really hard practice tests for each other, and we asked the most obscure things. One of my questions for her was who invented the microscope, because that's something that had been mentioned in lecture. So here's the practice test she made for me, and these were actually really helpful because this had a lot of things in it, like what are the 4 types of macromolecules, which was actually in the test. What is meiosis versus mitosis, also in the test. So altogether, that was really helpful, and it's also really fun. You can make each other crazy hard practice problems. And it's also a huge confidence boost because you're like, now I know all this information that I didn't know before. And it's just an overall really effective method for taking tests that have a lot of information in them. The next type of test-taking strategy works really well for tests that are based on discussions and lectures in class, and that's retyping your notes. So the thing about rewriting your notes is it does help you memorize it, but rewriting takes a really, really long time, and typing is altogether a lot faster. So I have this honors class called World Text and Image, and a lot of the questions on the test are based on the things that we've discussed in class. So I'll take notes during class, and then before a test, I'll retype those notes 7 times. So I did it with that class, and I've also done it with biology, and both of those have really, really helped. And then our final strategy is for essays that you have to take during tests. These are always a bit nerve-wracking because you can't prepare for them and proofread like you would for a normal essay. With that said, you can absolutely prepare. Sometimes you'll get a prompt ahead of time. So what a lot of times I'll do is I'll memorize an outline with different subpoints. I have a brother who actually verbatim memorizes the essays he's going to write. But for me, that's just a lot of time, and a lot of times I don't get the exact prompt that they're going to give me. So if I memorize a rough outline, I can kind of twist it and tweak it to whatever the prompt is exactly going to be. And even if I don't know the prompt ahead of time and I'm just given the prompt during the test, taking like 5 minutes before I write it to make a little outline, like Roman numeral 1 is the introduction, 2, 3, and 4 are the body paragraphs, 5 is the conclusion, and I brainstorm what I want to say in each paragraph. It just really helps me to streamline my thoughts, and I feel better about the essay in general. Well, there you have 7 of the test strategies I use to prepare for exams. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe because I post 1 video a week, either about books, college, something in between. And in the comments, I'd love to hear about how your semester's gone and also some of your own test-taking strategies, because I could always use more. Let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!